Welcome, eCom Logistics Nation. Thank you for joining today's episode. We're on a mission to share e-commerce logistics insights, trends, successes, and challenges from the leaders and innovators in our space.
I've certainly had to comb through hours of video footage in the past to try and figure out what happened with forklift accidents and stuff like that. And that is so time consuming, I'll tell you. So having something, technology like computer vision, like you talked about, that can just call it out and pinpoint those events to you, I think is a huge thing for operations.
Welcome to this episode of the eCom Logistics Podcast. Nanad and I are really excited for today's chat with our guest and podcaster in his own right, Kevin Lawton. Kevin has been involved in the distribution industry for a little over 11 years with a primary focus on inventory control and micro fulfillment. He started the New Warehouse podcast back in 2019 and now has a very impressive over 350 episodes published. He's grown the New Warehouse into a 3PL service business with a recently opened micro fulfillment center in Philadelphia. He is adjunct professor in supply chain at Rider University. Kevin, it's great to have you on the show, and welcome to the other side of the podcast table.
Yes. It's good to be on it. I'm learning how to be a guest, typically. I'm the host, right? I hosted you guys before, and now we're switching the table. So it's great to be here. I really appreciate what you guys are putting out there with the eCom Logistics Podcast. I think it's fantastic, and I'm honored and happy to be here as a guest.
Amazing, man. Being on the other side, I think it's a little easier to be a guest if you just let it go, right? So to all the future guests, I think being a guest is easier than hosting. At least, with all the recordings I've done so far, I think I still have to constantly be thinking about the next step and how do I angle it and how do I pose this question, versus every time I've been a guest, I just let myself go. And it's a free way of just having a conversation. Looking forward to it, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll commence letting myself go right now.
Exactly.
Here we go. All right.
Let it go.
Let it go. Yeah. So, Kevin, you are, you're typically the one asking the questions. Sure. And again, super impressive 350 plus episodes published out there, focused on warehousing, supply chain, and logistics. And you've had many interesting guests and really insightful conversations. So as a way of getting kicked off, I'm curious how those conversations over the past several years have guided you, in your journey, and any big takeaways that you'd like to share.
Sure. Yeah. I think overall it's just the learning aspect of it. I started the podcast really for a selfish reason. Because I wanted to learn more about the industry. I was not, formally educated in supply chain or anything like that. I didn't think that I would end up in the warehousing world. I didn't grow up saying I want to be involved in packing orders or something like that, right? I kind of fell into it, and then at some point in my career, a couple of years in, I decided okay, I'm going to embrace this a little bit, and how do I learn more about the industry, what's happening in the industry. And really, my way of learning and digesting content at that time was through blogs, because I grew up in high school, college, very much into the sneaker collecting world, and that's how I would get information. So I was thinking, there must be a cool blog for warehousing, and no, there wasn't. So I really just wanted to learn, right? And decided I'm going to start a blog. And then that was too much work. And my boss at the time, actually, we had been talking about this thing, and he was the one why don't you do a podcast? And I actually had never listened to a podcast at that point.
Okay.
And so I'm maybe that seems a little easier. You just have to talk, right? So I tried it and figured it out, and for me it was it was a way for me to learn, but it was also a way for me to get more connected in the industry too. So I guess to answer your question, the biggest takeaway is just how much I think the logistics, distribution, fulfillment world is just rapidly growing over the last couple years. I think when I started the podcast 2019, just going and seeing and talking to different companies like, robotics and stuff was like very fresh, and a lot of people were just like, skeptical about it. And I think the one thing is that when I look at the landscape of distribution, fulfillment, and logistics space, like it seems like there's these technologies out there like robotics, like AI, machine learning, all these different types of things that I've learned about through the podcast, but they're kind of maybe introduced to the world in like this broad idea, but it seems like they actually find their practical applications within our space, which is really cool because you don't see you don't go everywhere out in the world and see robotics, but in like manufacturing, logistics, warehousing, I mean, it's a legitimate thing that's happening. So I think that's probably my biggest takeaway, is that the space that we're in seems to be on some of like the cutting edge of technology, and not necessarily initially inventing that technology, but initially giving it a practical, useful application. And I would say that, yeah.
I would even say, Kevin, that there is a lot on the tech side that evolves from our industry, right? Like just because, I mean, there is one or couple, but one primary factor to it all, and that is the labor cost, right? Like technology implementation from a labor standpoint is absolutely critical to keep the overall cost down. Again, it's not, jobs are just shifting to other arenas, so it's not taking jobs away per se, but that's a driving factor. The other is storage utilization, right? Like how do I go higher? How do I go, more denser inside my storage solutions, right? So that's been driving another, and that's real estate footprint cost, right? That kind of drives that. And then there is volumes. Like, how do I do way more than I can do from that given footprint and from that labor that I have available? And dude, like the unemployment rate is 4% right now. Like 4%, growing up, going to economics classes, I was told 4% is equal to actually 0%, because at any given time, 4% unemployment means 4% of the population they are not working for various different reasons, and that's by choice. So 4 is 0. So we are in a zero unemployment situation. Like, how are we going to replace that? Another thing is demographic replacement rate of population is starting to shift as well. So there is many older people, right? Like, so warehousing jobs right now are, who's working there. It's usually the younger crowd that ends up working there. Some end up making them a long-term career, but as a picker, packer, loader, etc., that's kind of the segment you play with. And that population pool is decreasing year by year. Fortunately, the replacement rate is still there, but not as much as it used to be. So I think there is a lot of factors that are actually driving the innovation within the robotic space. And just wanted to add this, over the last 48 hours, Dan and I and some other folks from the company have been working on building a market map of all the players in the market, right? And dude, I can tell you, I've been in this space for close to 20 years.
Yeah.
I don't recognize 90% of those companies. Like, just to put it in perspective, that's how many players are in this space, right? Like, and mad respect, right? Like to that 90% as well. If I don't know you, please connect with me, right? But like it is a lot of players. And that just goes to show how much economic movement there is in creating efficiency inside these warehouse environments. It's amazing. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even to your point of, not knowing 90% of these companies that are out there now, like I look at when I started the podcast and, I've been working in this industry, but as far as like branching out and reaching outside of, the companies that I was working for, like I really hadn't done any of that. So I was learning about a lot of stuff, and I happened to go to ProMat, which was probably like a month and a half after I released the first episode, and someone just suggested or asked me if I was going to be there, and I was kind of like, ProMat, like what's ProMat? I don't know. I kind of acted like I knew, and then quickly Googled after, and then I figured out how to get in there and do some interviews there and stuff. But just going from that ProMat 2019 to like this Modex last year, 2022, and just seeing like the overall expansion in the company's focus in robotics and automation, and even like other very interesting technologies, is just remarkable. It's crazy to think about it. And to your point, I mean, I think everybody's just trying to figure out how to address those issues, and I think it's really, really interesting for the market.
Absolutely. And, you know, I just want to give one little anecdote. This week, I was fortunate enough to walk through Gap's premier site, let's call it, right? So their facility, and I got a little penny tour inside the facility to take a look. And again, a lot of technology in there I worked with before in my past life, right? But it was literally like a combination of a museum of technologies that can go inside a warehouse. I'm not even joking, man. Like anything you can imagine, like ASRS to auto baggers to auto loaders to automated receiving to, you know, robots to robotic arms to automated sortation systems to racetracks for automation, right? Like unit sortation, just absolutely phenomenal. You get to see all of that, and it's like, it just goes to show, right, these investments, because it's an older facility that's being restructured right now, and it's again, it's the pressures that we spoke about that is driving some of that improvement. And yes, there is that investment coming from these companies where they see the value being returned, and thus we have all of these new companies saying, okay, it's time for us to try and capture this market. So I think it's a super exciting time to be in this space, my friend. And you know, you don't even, as I said, you don't even need to know 90% of the market. Just 10% is good enough.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, it's amazing to see. And like, to your point, like you have these larger companies that have a longer history and stuff that have been starting to invest in these things. But I think it's interesting too to see now the inflection point a little bit where the cost and what initially or a couple of years ago would have been the barrier to entry would have been the overall cost of putting in some of these solutions has come way down, and companies have figured out a way to do like robots as a service and all these different things to allow like those smaller, medium-sized players to start to get into the automation. And I think that makes it very real, I think, in my eyes. Like that makes it very like, okay, this is here and this is the way to go. And I think it's, you know, even from like some of the conversation I had at Modex last year, it was more like, you know, it changed from where I think attendees and companies were saying like, oh, you know, let's look at these robots and, you know, maybe this is in our roadmap, you know, a couple of years from now, to like, okay, like I need these robots, like when can you deliver, basically,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. These business cases are becoming super easy, right? Like 10-month payback period, transactional cost robot, no upfront cost of implementing, where you're basically like paying per unit. Again, if you look at the long-term cost, I think it would be better for you to be able to acquire some of this stuff. But still, the barrier to entries are being removed. I want to put a robotic arm in my building. I can now go ahead and do that because I'm being charged at a certain volume, which I know I have.
Yeah.
Right. And if I do, then I can prove it out. And being able to do pilot initiatives is getting easier. And one of the biggest moves, because you can buy any technology you want from a hardware platform or automation platform standpoint. If your WMS cannot talk to it, you have a big problem.
Yeah.
And the good news is all the digitization, all the modernization that's going on in the WMS platforms is making that easier and easier and easier, where you don't need to spend millions of dollars to turn on a piece of automation. Right. Now it's just a matter of a couple weeks of effort and you're ready to go with some testing, and you can have a pilot going. And if you prove it out a couple months later, you can have it deployed in your entire network. And I think it's amazing, and I hope that keeps happening in the future.
Yeah. I think that's a great thing too. And I, certainly had some of those companies on the podcast and talked to them, and even like we just recently had, actually this morning before we were recording this, we had a little new video series we do, and we had SVT Robotics on, and companies like that and warehouse orchestration companies and things like that are making it just super easy to not only bring in like one solution, but multiple solutions to communicate with each other and make it very easy for the integration. I think that's a huge thing too as well, because not everybody is going to have the resources or the ability to, bring somebody on staff with a, PhD in robotics or something like that, right? So you need to make it easy for us, regular operations folks to be able to do it, right?
Absolutely. And shout out to SVT Robotics, probably one of my favorite companies out there.
Oh, yeah.
For what they do. Just you brought that name up, so I just want to give them a shout out. I don't know them. I just know their solution. Pretty cool tech.
Oh,
everyone
you don't know
should take a look at it.
I have to connect you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, they have what we featured actually was the innovation lab, and do you get to see like how easy it is for that like softbot platform? It's crazy to think about. Yeah.
Amazing.
So Kevin, I know when we were chatting earlier too, you've had access. You've been able to see some of these applications that most of us see on the trade show floor in real use. You had mentioned it fulfilled the use of digital twin and that actually using Google Maps to navigate employees in the warehouse, and other examples like Google Glass and maybe virtual reality. So I'd love to give you the opportunity to chat about some of this tech and these tools that you've actually seen in application, and what are your thoughts and what are you really excited about?
Right. Like you mentioned the Google Glass, and I think when Google Glass came out and was this concept, I think it was like a very this is a cool idea, right? But what's the practical application that everybody's going to walk around with Google Glasses on every day, to do just normal basic stuff? And I think that kind of got lost a little bit and fizzled, right? But now we look at our world again, right? Practical application where you're taking Google Glass. I think Picavi was using the Google Glass platform, I think, for augmented reality in the warehouse, and basically allowing you to be hands-free when you're picking, because you're wearing the glasses, and all your information for the picking, what are you supposed to pick, where are you supposed to pick from, the quantity, is basically just projected in a heads-up type of augmented reality situation. So when you use something like the augmented reality situation in a glasses type of form, it gives you that information is just always with you. And you really don't have to, drop anything. You can combo it with a ring scanner or something like that. And you're truly hands-free when you're picking, which I think is a great thing for productivity and efficiency, but then also from the safety aspect as well. And I've used the Picavi, which is really cool. And then Zebra has, I think it's the HD4000, which I got to go to Zebra and try out. And that was pretty cool as well. I think there is some future there with the augmented reality and being able to use that, even from the perspective of quality as well, doing quality inspections or something, being able to, use machine learning and computer vision through something that's attached to you, and identify when there's defects or something, and then, alert you on a heads up display. So that's really cool stuff. And then the VR as well that you mentioned, I really love the VR applications in our world. I think the virtual reality situations used for training is just, I think there's so much space and room for that to grow. I've used the Raymond forklifts, virtual reality training simulator for forklift training, and I've done forklift training on actual forklifts with new employees and things like that. Actually, in my last role, I was in charge of safety, so I had to do all that. And you're trying to train somebody that's maybe is just started out on working on the dock or something like that. They don't have any material handling equipment experience, and you can get a little nervous, maybe, scared, putting them on a live truck, right? Especially, when you're in a warehouse environment and, all this stuff is around, right? But the virtual reality is it's like they put you, the Raymond version is like they put you right on a machine, basically. So you're using all the same controls, and it reacts in the virtual reality. You're wearing like the virtual reality headset, and it reacts in the same way that the truck would react. And it has, you're in a virtual warehouse, but the truck is not moving, right? But it feels like you're moving, you're doing all the things. I mean, they even have like the checklist and all that stuff is really cool. Yeah.
And I mean, Kevin, the one thing I'll say, Kevin, is I agree about the future of AR, VR tech. I am not bullish on the current state of the union, though. I mean, from a practicality standpoint, wear a Vuzix or a Google Glass and try and walk around the building for, 30 minutes, all exciting. You give it to someone for 8 hours a day, your head be spinning. And I will tell you something, I've also used the Raymond forklift simulator, and it was fun.
Right.
15 minutes after being in there, I wanted to throw up.
So definitely, I agree with you that there's a lot of room to improve, but I think the concept and where it's potentially heading is really exciting. And that, I think for me too, I love the training stuff because just the safety aspect overall. And I think that training in the warehouse, it should be the same every time, right?
Yeah.
And I think like programs like that allow you to do that kind of same type of training every time instead of like,
exactly.
This manager trains it this way and this manager trains it this way, and then there's some gap in between, right?
I agree, man. And I'm a little bullish on things like, people have spoken about RFID for ages, but I think it's doing a resurgence right now, and it's starting to make more sense in the warehousing environment that it didn't before. So like identification system, drone tech, and the biggest bullishness that I have is straight up computer vision. Yeah. Computer vision application in the warehousing has not taken off at the level that it needs to be at. And lots of good companies doing lots of good stuff. But like computer vision at a pack station, computer vision monitoring the entire warehouse flow. I know you kind of spoke about that you saw like a GPS tracked kind of internal movement of folks within the warehouse. But the technology is still not good when it comes to internal warehouse movement. Yeah. When you mount computer vision, it starts making a lot of sense. Who's where, how much travel, what's happening, the amount of data that you start accumulating to then make continuous improvement. And the tech's not expensive. It's cheap, right? Like it's not like going and buying an ASRS. Right. It's a bunch of computers and whatever platform actually manages it, or a bunch of cameras and whatever tech actually manages it. So I'm very bullish on computer vision taking off seriously in general warehousing terms.
Yeah. I mean, I think the potential applications there are huge. I know there's some companies, just talked to one recently, I'm trying to remember their name. They're doing like a computer vision, basically tapping into your existing cameras that you have in the warehouse and able to just integrate with that and put their computer vision over that from a safety perspective.
Amazing.
And then offering like some type of insurance coverage like along with that, right? So being able to like assess your risks in the warehouse, and the computer vision is able to tell you like when there was a potentially risky move either by a forklift or even like potentially showing you, people are not lifting in a proper way or something like that. And being able to see that, I think is huge. And being able to utilize that visualization, I think, is even bigger now, as well as we see everywhere. I'm in New Jersey, and it's just explosion of warehouses, right? And they're all huge. They're all like gigantic, right? So when you think about that, and you think about how we're reducing staff by bringing in automation and robotics, and just having labor shortages in general, less people wanting to work in warehouses, and you think about maybe 4 or 5 managers needing to cover 500,000 square feet. You can't be everywhere at the same time, right? So any tools that that management can use to understand like what's really happening, I think is huge, because when things happen when there's an accident, right? But how many times do you not know when there was almost an accident, right? So you miss like that whole preventative step and that whole preventative gap in your operation. And, I've certainly, heard stories in my experience where, there's been almost accidents or something and no one said anything, right? As much as you try and preach, we have a safety culture, like we want you to tell us, is there a near miss, something happened? I think it's in human nature to, either think like, well, nothing happened, so I'm not going to say anything, or like, oh, I don't want to say anything because maybe a previous culture I would have gotten in trouble, right? Or something like that. So having those, eyes in the sky or having more vision into what's happening and using technology that can help you pinpoint those events versus, scanning through hours of video footage, I think is huge. And definitely, to your point, I think that's going to be like a really big thing in understanding, movements in the operation. Where can you improve those things? And, I've certainly had to comb through hours of video footage in the past to try and figure out what happened with forklift accidents and stuff like that. And
exactly,
that is so time consuming, I'll tell you. So having something, technology like computer vision, like you talked about, that can just like, call it out and pinpoint those events to you, I think is a huge thing for operations to get better.
Exactly. And also like, tapping into existing versus just installing. It's not a big deal to install cameras throughout the building, right? Like they're cheap and they are, easily accessible. Even at a pack station, right? Like you can get a camera for $200, right? Like, and you don't need a special camera. It's not about the camera. It's what the machine learning system does in the back end in the cloud. I think that's where the power resides. So yeah, brother, looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. It's an exciting time.
All right, Kevin, now it's your turn to answer my curiosity. When you think of, your podcast and think of, why you started it to learn, right, and to really immerse yourself in the space, you've had hundreds and hundreds of conversations, almost 400 episodes out there. All that we just talked about, exposure to technology and facilities. And if you take all of that and you call it a focus group and you call it an MBA or PhD in supply chain, you took all of that and you said you saw an opportunity and you struck and you launched a micro fulfillment center in Philadelphia.
Yes.
I believe this is past year, right?
In 2022, yeah.
So what did you see? What did you hear? What trends influenced you to go down that path, and what really excites you about that space?
Sure. Yeah. It's an interesting question. And I've always known that, I wanted to do my own thing, have my own business. And, I went to school. I majored in entrepreneurial studies. And so, I always knew I wanted to do something, but I didn't quite have, an idea. I've done like little things here and there along the way, but nothing like that. I'm like, oh, I can really, dig into this for the long term. And, expanding upon my knowledge in the warehousing fulfillment industry as I was working, also doing the podcast and just making connections and seeing like, how do I take the new warehouse and like, really make it into, something else too. And actually back in 2019, that's when I had Ben Jones, who's the founder, CEO of Ojai Technologies on the show. And it just happened that I got a press release sent to me talking about this Ojai Technologies as a micro warehouse in Manhattan. And at the time, I hadn't really heard about the concept of like a micro warehouse. And I was like really intrigued because I was working in, I think at that time I was probably working somewhere around like 200,000 square foot facility. So I'm thinking like warehouse, middle of Manhattan, like what is that? Like how does that work, right? And so I messaged back and forth with the person and sent the release, and basically I was like, I'm in New Jersey. Is there any way I can come see? Like, how does this work? Like, what does this look like? And so I went up there and met Ben, and he was on the podcast and thing. It was very interesting. Like, and I think what intrigued me about the space the most was almost the the real estate play in a sense, because they were in this initial location in Manhattan. Like they had taken a unit basically in just like a regular office building in the middle of the city. I think it was on the 3rd or 4th floor, that had not been, the landlord couldn't get a tenant for like, I think it was like 3 years or something like that. So they came in and they built this little fulfillment center in there. And it was a really interesting way to think about what could potentially happen to all of this vacant and like dying different types of commercial real estate spaces that are around, right? Like the, empty, I mean, I look in my town, like empty grocery stores, or a store that used to be Bradley's, if anybody remembers Bradley's from way back, it's been empty for years, right? So
Kmart.
it's like, Kmart, like all those, right? And so I was thinking like, wow, this is a really interesting concept to think about how to utilize these spaces in a little different way that have been vacant for a long time. And then the concept too was that they're able to now be closer to the customer and do delivery, within same day, 2-hour delivery, which also was kind of like blowing my mind too. Like thinking about, this is 2019, like thinking about being able to get something same day or within 2 hours is, it's super fast, right, at the time. So yeah, I mean, it really intrigued me. And, it was on a way different scale than what I had been working in. So that was also very interesting to me. And they were trying to just prove out, their platform and how it was going to work. And I just kind of, joked with him when we met that I was like, oh, you ever want to, come to Philly, let me know, I might be interested in helping run it or something. Right. And so we just stayed in touch over time. And then, then this past, or I guess 2021, we just were talking and they just went through like a round of funding and they're ready to expand locations. And they wanted to come to Philly first. And so we just kind of talked and, we did a deal so I can run the operation there. So that allowed the new warehouse to be able to now start to offer these fulfillment services. And basically we're doing 3PL services for Ojai and the brands that are working through them, which has been very, very interesting. A lot of fun and learning. I went from the last facility I was managing. I was in like 270,000 square feet. And now our micro fulfillment center in Center City, Philadelphia, is 2,700 square feet, right? So
2,700?
2,700, yeah.
Okay.
So
how high is the ceiling?
So this space used to be a nail salon. So it is like in the heart of the city. If you're familiar with Philadelphia, you know where Love Park is. It's 2 blocks away from Love Park, right?
So it's 9 clear. You got a 9 feet ceiling.
Yeah.
So I mean, any automation in there?
No automation at this point. I mean, we have WMS, but it's very low tech in that sense. I mean, we can push out a couple hundred orders out of there daily. And we're doing same day, 2-hour delivery, scheduled same day delivery, which I think is a big thing that's going to be growing more within the Philadelphia region. And then actually out of that small space, we're doing next day delivery as far north as New Hampshire all the way down to DC. So we're covering a lot of area with the service, and it's been really interesting to figure out because it's like super big contrast from like my prior experience, right? But probably the most surprising thing for me is just seeing, the types of things that people want to order for, same day or 2-hour rush. I think that's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Kevin, I built about 5 micro fulfillment centers at this point, ranging from 800 square feet to somewhere close to 8,000 square feet, right? In that range. And the one big takeaway that I'll say is the economics of the entire order has to change for it to be supported, because the unit economics at a warehouse level does not work. If we just translate the standard unit economics of a 200,000 square feet and say, okay, I'm going to apply that same labor, same efficiency, blah, 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 and then try and build a model around it, it literally collapses. And then, see, you got certain fixed cost and even the variable, right? Like it doesn't change as much, right? So the higher the ceiling you have, the lower the rent you have, right? Like you are in an industrial area versus you are in the city center, right? So your lease rates now impactful. Your labor rates are the same as industrial area or the city area, right? So all of these things start playing into it. And so the warehouse economics can only change if the unit economics of the order changes at the platform level, right? If we try to do it and we try to say, I'm going to compete with Amazon, that becomes a problem because they still have big warehouses and they still have those trucks and they still have, that real estate and aggregated labor and density necessary. We can't do the same thing inside in a micro fulfillment. Like that's one thing. And I think it's changing. Yeah. And the question is, are you seeing it change, right? Like now that you are dabbling in it.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm seeing it change, and it's even, just we opened in doors in April of 2022, even just in a little under a year, been seeing a very interesting change. I would say that, the same day, and especially the same day scheduling is certainly picked up more. And, I went into this with an open mind, this is a new experience and we'll be learning here along the way. But it has been really surprising to see, just the demand for that service. And then also, you talk about the growth in units and things like that, and just the ability to cover so much area within next day with having the right partners in place for carrier services and things like that. And we're certainly seeing where we've just been on an upward trend of growth from month to month, allowing us to be able to, be closer to that customer. I mean, you talk about lease rates. I mean, we look at the space that we're in. I think that's one of the big factors where, micro fulfillment could potentially make or break, right? Because the whole concept and the way I see it is, being closer to the customer and where the customer is at. But the closer you get to the customer, the denser area, the higher the lease is going to be, essentially, right?
Exactly.
So, it's about getting, because we have, multiple brands. We probably have 20 to 30 brands, I think, that we do the fulfillment for there at the current time. And, it's about getting those brands that are going to cover that area and have demand in that area.
Yep.
We've certainly seen where, some brands it's just not as much demand in that area, but then some brands come in and there's huge demand in that area, and they just kind of explode through us, and it's certainly pretty remarkable, and I can see where it's heading and how that growth and being able to provide those services for brands that maybe typically couldn't put together the infrastructure internally, or have the resources to do that internally and offer that service level, like a partner like us and OI Technologies is certainly one that can help them offer those services to their customers.
Makes sense, man.
Yeah.
I think automation is going to be the name of the game in there. Unfortunately, automation startup cost in a smaller footprint at this point is a little higher. So because you create more density and more goods to person and whatnot, right? When you only have 2,700 square feet, you don't want aisles. You know what I'm saying? You don't want aisles because aisles take up square footage, right? You want a cube that just gives you stuff.
Yeah.
But that's expensive, right? And it requires ceiling height. So we got some challenges to solve in front of us.
Oh yeah, we definitely have some challenges, and the one thing I say to people that ask me, how's it going? That I worked with in the past and stuff, and I'm like, remember when we had 270,000 square feet and we were saying like, we don't have enough space, like we need more space. Like I really like, 2,700 square feet.
I really need more space.
Yeah. Like we get like super creative with the layout and how we put product and things like that. And it's super interesting. And
you see the shelves are built inside the washroom? Yes, that's actually a bay for me, right?
Oh yeah. I have so many different sizes of shelves, right? Because it's like, there's like a little column here, and I could get a shelf that's like 26 inches wide. So I have like one that's 26, and then I have like standard like 4 foot. But anywhere there's like a spot, like we try and figure out like, okay, how can we utilize this space, to maximize it and be able to just do as much throughput through there as possible to maximize the space. Yeah.
Makes sense.
So maybe, Kevin, much of our audience too are brands, right? Brands that are maybe considering micro fulfillment or considering offering same day, next day delivery options. So, as you have this experience now, any advice that you would give to a brand in the mid-market that's considering offering that type of delivery solution?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the first is to have the right partner. If I looked at it from a brand perspective and I was, like you said, mid-market and, I was trying to see like, how can I do same day or next day services, like to try and figure that out on your own, like as a brand and create your own supply chain around that and stuff. I think it is be like a daunting task and a lot of resources, right? But having the right partner, whether it's like, with us or Ojai, like it makes the world of difference because they've created that supply chain already. But then on the other side, I think there's for a brand to have success going through those channels, I think they need to ensure that they have some sophistication in like their inventory planning and some maturity there. That's the one thing I would say is to be able to understand your inventory allocation and what channels are you pushing it through, making sure you have the right coverage for your brand to reach your customers, and then ensuring that you are paying attention to those inventory levels when it comes to your same day, next day, 2-hour provider, and ensuring that they're stocked there, because it's a bonus for your customer, right? To be able to have that service level. But if you're offering that service level and then not able to deliver on it, then it's you're not going to see, I don't think, as much repeat use of that, right? So that's the one thing I would say. But I would say definitely start with the right partner, and then they can kind of help you, help guide you in that direction.
Makes sense.
Fantastic.
Yeah, Kevin. So, man, really, really appreciate you joining us today. Appreciate you again sitting on the other side and getting peppered with questions and your thoughts and feedback and responses have been really insightful. So appreciate it. Again, want to thank you for joining us, and want to just give you the opportunity to share with everyone where to follow you, where to learn more about the new warehouse, and how to check out your podcast.
Yeah, definitely. And, first I want to say thank you for having me on as a guest on the other side of the table here. And it's definitely an honor to sit down with you guys and talk. I really appreciate what you guys are doing for the industry through the podcast and just your company in general, putting out great content for the industry. I think is super important and very helpful for everyone out there. But for me, you can find, the New Warehouse podcast. It's on every podcast platform that's out there. If there's one that you listen to and it's not on there, let me know and I'll get it on there. And you can also check out the New Warehouse at thenewwarehouse.com and follow us on LinkedIn. That's where we are releasing our new video series on a weekly basis, which is called All Hands. And we kind of dive into some different visual aspects that maybe the audio podcast can't quite cover.
Beautiful, man. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it,
buddy.
Yes, thank you guys very much.
Hi, I'm Ninad Acharya, CEO and co-founder of Fulfillment IQ, and I'm here with
Dan Call, CRO and partner at Fulfillment IQ. We're the team behind the eCom Logistics Podcast. Our mission is to provide you with genuine insights from our work alongside logistics leaders to help you improve your supply chain.
In the eCom Logistics Podcast, we share the knowledge and the insights we've gained from working alongside amazing brands, retailers, 3PLs, and VCs, so you can make the most out of your supply chain journey.
If you like what you're hearing, we'd truly appreciate your support with a 5-star rating on your favorite podcasting channel. Your feedback not only keeps us going, but also helps others find the podcast. If you think Fulfillment IQ can assist you, or if you have an idea related to logistics, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always up for a chat and ready to explore new possibilities together.
Stay tuned to the eCom Logistics Podcast on your favorite podcast platform for fresh and practical insights into e-commerce and logistics. Until next time, let's keep making a difference in logistics together.